Hey there, I'm Derek Skaletsky, founder of Sherlock, and today we're going to go through how to define product qualified leads, and especially how to create a framework where you can define them for your product because this is something that's unique for every product. So let's jump right in. Let's start with kind of defining what a product qualified lead is. I know this is the product led summit, so most of this audience should probably have an idea for what this is, but it's still a relatively new concept. So just so we're on the same page, a product qualified lead is a prospective or potential customer that is likely to convert to paid based on them achieving some sort of initial value with a free version of your product. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but basically, this is a lead that's qualified based on their usage of your product. So the question I get all the time is, so why should I care about product qualified leads? And this is a tough question for me because in this day and age, I just don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question because I just don't know how you could not care about product qualified leads in this day and age. So just bear with me as I answer this question as best I can. The reason why you need to care about product qualified leads is basically an evolutionary. My answer is evolutionary, right? In the old world of software, it was a sales led world. If you wanted to buy software for your company, you had to contact the company and talk to a sales guy and go through the whole qualification process and fill out forms and have demos and maybe face to face meetings and all this kind of stuff, right? It was a sales, you couldn't purchase software without talking to that guy. Um, but everything has changed in this new world, especially with SaaS. Anybody can buy software from anywhere. If you have a credit card and an internet connection, you can purchase important software for your business. So this is a product-led world. Obviously, that's why we're at this summit this week. But this is a product-led world. The most important aspect of this product-led world, when it comes to lead qualification and a sales buying software process, is that we live in a try before you buy world. This product-led world is a try before you buy world. Um, Nobody buys software today without trying it first. I'm going to say it again. No one buys software today without trying it first. And how you try it can come in a few different forms. You can have a free trial, 14-day free trial, 30-day free trial. You can have a freemium version of a product where you just can use it as much as you want for free until you hit some paywall. Um, or even a lot of people listening to this probably sell enterprise software that doesn't have a free trial or a freemium option for their software. However, even if they're going through a sales process, your sales team is giving some sort of proof of concept to your prospective buyers. Some 30-day directed trial, some 15-day thing where they are getting a chance to try the software before they actually decide to sign on the line and purchase it. So, again, I'm going to go back and say that nobody buys software today without trying it first. And that is the biggest shift. Everything you do is trying to direct people towards a free version of your product, whether they visit your homepage. Today, you're trying to get them to try it for free. They visit your pricing page, test it out, try it for free. They download your ebook, and you're trying to funnel them into a free trial. Um, Even if you're going from your website and funneling them into a demo or a conversation with sales, those salespeople are still funneling them into some sort of trial version of the product, some sort of proof of concept. So everything you do is driving people towards actually using your product. And that is revolutionary in changing the whole game. And therefore, if everything you do is getting people to try a free version of your product before they pay, then if you're not qualifying those prospective buyers based on how they're using your product or not, then your qualification process for those prospective buyers is actually running counter to your business model. You're actually doing something completely opposed to the way you're actually selling and delivering the software. So when people ask me why should I care about product qualified leads, why should I use product qualified leads as a model, I, I I just say you don't have a choice, right? If you're using a try before you buy model for your software business, you don't have a choice but to qualify based on product usage. So I hope that helps. So now let's dig in a little bit. Means what does it mean to be product qualified? What is product qualified? So quick word on why we qualify. This is obviously not too new to a lot of people, but basically, I do want to talk a little bit about why we qualify, just so we're on the same page. But qualifying prospective customers is essential to optimize the efficiency and effectiveness of your sales team. Whatever your sales process is, it's to optimize the efficiency and effectiveness. You don't want to pay salespeople to go and chase after bad leads that are never going to buy, but also you want them to be more effective. You want them to be able to close at a much higher rate and spend their time wisely. So that's why we qualify leads before we dedicate a team to actually going after and talking to those people. In this presentation, when we're talking about product qualified leads, we're really not talking about a no sales model. I think that's something we could talk about adjacent to this conversation. But really what we're talking about here is SaaS models that still use sales teams in some section of their funnel. Because really what we're talking about with qualification is at what point can we afford to dedicate people to try and close those deals. So that's really the whole point of qualification. We want to get them to a point where, yes, now we're ready and able and willing to have someone on our team actually get involved here. So that's what we're talking about. So how we qualify leads has always been based on two main factors: firmographics and their interest in buying your product. And we measure those in a couple different ways. So firmographics is about matching your customer profile, right? So you sell software to companies of this size, with these problems, with these types of people in this location, with this revenue, or with this much revenue, et cetera, right? So these are all ways that you qualify the account, the firm that you're selling into. And this is today is about the same as it has been traditionally, how you're going to qualify based on firmographics. I would argue SaaS model, the product-led model, expands that a lot. You don't need as rigid a target customer profile as you used to, but basically the things you're going to look at are about the same from a firmographics perspective. Measuring interest is where things have really changed, because traditionally in the old world, the sales-led world, you measured whether or not a prospect was interested in buying your product based on how many times they visited the website, what pages they looked at, did they download your white paper or ebook, did they look at your pricing page, did they sign up for a demo. So all these things were indicators that they were interested in buying your product. And this is where the big change has come, because in this new world, in a product-led world, it's really about, are they using your product? How are they using the product? That's it. They're interested in your product if they're using your product and they're getting value from your product that you gave to them to use for free. So this is where it really changes in measuring interest. So how do we measure interest in this new world based on product usage? A couple ways we'll talk about right now. First is called hand raising, and the second we're going to call organic engagement. So hand raising, most of you probably know what this means and what this is. It's probably the most common type of way to qualify a lead for freemium models and or for post-initial sale, which we'll talk about later. But basically, this is saying, we're going to lock off some features for that free version of our software. And if people want to use those features, we're going to put a gate up, but we're going to give them a way to raise their hand and say, yes, I'd like to learn more about this. At that point, your team contacts them and sets up a demo and tries to sell them on that paid feature. So that's what we call hand raising. People have indicated manually by clicking a learn more button or talk to sales button or get a demo button, I'm interested in this feature that costs money. The second way is organic engagement. And this is the best way to measure based for free trial models. I would argue also for freemium, but it really works best with free trial models, and that is that you're going to track the engagement, the product usage of all your trials. You're going to make sure you do it at the account level. This is really important. I think at the last product led summit I did account, or one of them I did account-based engagement tracking. Um, but do remember, you can't just do this at the user level. You got to track it at the account level because multiple users on an account will contribute to the engagement with that account. And what you want to do when looking at organic engagement and measuring qualification based on organic engagement is measure something we call activation rate. So let's look at what that means. Measuring activation. So activation rate. Most people understand the concept of activation, getting a new account activated. So that means they've basically gone through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that you want them to do to get set up in your product and get to that first aha moment or first value. So once they do that, we consider them activated. An an activation rate, however, is a measure of how far along that account has got to that journey toward activation, right? How far have they gotten? We don't recommend measuring activation in a binary way, right? We don't think that someone is activated or not activated. We think there's a path, and you need to understand how far along that path each account is. So as an example, if you had a Gmail plugin product, this is kind of what your activation journey might look like. The account signs up, they connect to their G Suite account, they create an email template, they send 5 emails out, they view the report of that emails 2 times, they invite 2 teammates to the account, and we're going to consider them, wow, they're activated, they're ready to go. So that's activation. And an activation rate just says if they've done 2 of those steps, then they're 20% activated. If they've done 4 of those steps, then they're 80% activated. If they've done them all, then they're 100% activated. So that's what an activation rate is. And this is a super important metric when talking about measuring product qualified leads. And we'll show you why. You're going to want to look at activation rate at the account level and see exactly where they are and where they're stuck or what they haven't completed. And you're going to want to be able to look at this in an aggregate way because your teams are going to want to sort their accounts by activation rate. And the ones that are more activated are more qualified, etc. Once an account has reached a certain activation rate, that's when you're going to kind of consider them product qualified. So the next question is, but what rate should you use to consider them product qualified? Again, I don't think you should wait till full activation to consider someone product qualified. There is a range there, and you need to decide at what point are they qualified and can we afford having someone reach out and talk to them. So that's why we're going to introduce here this product qualified lead framework. We have an ebook on this that we actually wrote with Wes, but I want to go through it with you on this presentation. So when looking at the Pico framework, and when someone says at what rate should I qualify an account as product qualified, we ask 2 questions. How complex is your product? And how large is the potential opportunity you're talking about? How large is the revenue opportunity from that lead? So, and the reason we ask that is because the more complex your product, the earlier your team needs to get involved in the process to help them get to value. If you've got a really complex product, your team needs to get involved earlier. So, at an earlier activation rate, you want your team involved. If you've got a really simple product, hopefully most people can self-serve their way to value. And when we talk about size of opportunity, we don't think this is a one-size-fits-all approach or model because the bigger the opportunity that's in your funnel, the more you can afford, the earlier you can afford your team to get involved, right? If it's a big opportunity, you can afford your team spending more time to try and win that opportunity. If it's a smaller opportunity, you can't afford your team to. So you want to wait till later on in the activation journey to get involved. So when we talk about kind of measure generally complexity of a product, we generally ask, what percentage of your trial accounts can self-serve their way to that first value? And so for a simple product, that's generally around 70 or more percent of the trials can self-serve their way to value. If you're an intermediately complex product, about half of the trials can self-serve their way to value. If you have a complex product, you're only, about 25% of the trials are going to self-serve their way to that initial value. So that's a rough framework of how you can measure the complexity of your product. And then when you combine these, I know this looks like a lot, but we're going to break it down in a second. When you combine these, this is where you kind of get that framework. So, for example, if you have an intermediately complex product, um, you look at the size, potential size of the opportunity for each trial coming in, or each lead, if you will. And this tells you at what activation rate you can get your team involved. So if you have a really large deal, this is a big opportunity, Nike signs up, you can get your team involved pretty early, right? So account signs up and does the first couple things, your team can get involved and try and help that account along because it's a big opportunity. If it's a small deal, you don't want to get your team involved. You want them to prove that they have enough interest to get your team involved. Sometimes, for a lot of products, if it's a small deal, it's no touch at all. But if you have a little bit higher price point, you can get your team involved even with those small deals. You just want to wait until they show enough interest to become more activated. I'm sure these slides will be available later, so you can look at this in more detail. So some notes on the PQL framework. It's hard to predict deal sizes accurately. I know that's always an issue. Even traditionally, it's always been an issue on predicting potential deal sizes or opportunities. Most teams just use kind of the size of the company, whether that's based on employee count or revenue, as a proxy for the potential deal size. But that is something um, that's hard to predict, and we get that. And that's why we really encourage you not to be too rigid in designing a PQL process. PQL, this is not a very incredibly rigid framework. What you're trying to do is give good signaling for your team. What's important is you give them the transparency into what's going on with their accounts in the funnel, in their book, to help them make decisions on how they spend their time. So this is not something that can be, rigidly applied in a kind of robotic way. What's important is that you're providing the transparency that provides good signals for your team. You want to be able to give them something that looks like this, where they can sort by it and decide how they want to spend their time with their accounts. I hope that makes sense for everybody. So the question now, once you've kind of got a PQL framework designed and some definitions around how you want to do it, the question is, how do you do engagement? We're not going to go into huge detail on this. That could be a whole nother presentation maybe for next time. But basically, you got to think of this as two major phases in the process. One is an automation phase and one is a human touch phase. So trial signs up, the automation phase kicks in with in-app onboarding, onboarding emails, in-app help, help center, full-on help docs, videos, etc. Everything to help a new account self-serve their way to value. So providing all that is super important. You want to automate a lot of that so that they get to a certain point, at which point you can afford a human touch. So that means, call, demo, onboarding, implementation, support, maybe even some setup support, etc. So those are the two main kind of phases. And what separates those two phases is the PQL status, the product qualified lead status of that new account. And that is measured, as we just saw, based on their activation rates. So like I said, this PQL status will change, where that line is will change based on how you've defined your PQL process and the size of opportunities. But basically, this is what it looks like. We're going to say, for this size opportunity, once they get to 50% activation, that's when they become PQL status. That's when the human touch can start. And that's what this looks like. bonus, a PQL framework is not just for that initial conversion. So from free to paid, it's not just for that initial conversion. For a lot of SaaS companies today, and it'll become more and more prevalent, that expansion revenue, what they upgrade to over time from that initial sale, is becoming a bigger and bigger percentage of your new revenue bucket. So that initial sale, you may see a lot of people signing up for that first plan. And as they get more and more value, they'll expand their usage and upgrade to certain tiers or buy more seats or whatever that might be. So that expansion revenue is becoming super important. So applying that PQL mindset to driving that expansion revenue is also becoming as important. So how they're using the product, what they're using, how often, when, how they're engaging, all that is incredibly important in measuring someone's likelihood to expand their account. So whoever's managing that, that could be CS, that could be AEs, that could be account management. This is a framework they need to have in place as well to manage that expansion process. So to do that, PQL status can be, you can install those hand raising triggers like we saw before. So you've got, tier one, paid tier one gets them access to certain features and not access to others. And when they try and access those other features, you can have a learn more button where they raise their hand and look for a demo. You also can have usage limits, and this is very common, obviously. So, that first tier, first plan that you have gives them so many things. That might be seats, that might be tracked events, that might be number of new projects, number of users. So you may have some usage limits that would require them, once they hit those or pass those, it would require them to get to another tier and upgrade. So measuring when accounts are reaching those usage limits is really important, and defining that and driving product qualified lead status to people that are approaching those usage limits is really important, and you need to give your team access to that. And then finally, measure that organic or engagement over time. So if you see those accounts on that tier one really hammering away and using that product like hell, that's a great indicator that that account is potentially ripe for some expansion. If they saw the value of some of those other features, if it get on the phone with someone for half an hour, you may be able to drive them to upgrade to the next level. Also, if their engagement grows over time in any sort of dramatic way. So over the last 2 weeks, you're seeing engagement on an account really drive up. That is a good indicator of an account that potentially is ready for expansion and is worth a conversation with your team. So what's really important here, what I'm trying to get across is don't just think of product qualified leads as something, and a framework for that as something you need for that initial sale. It's actually something that you need to also use post sale to drive expansions. And another bonus, PQLs as a unifying metric. This is something I really love about product qualified leads. Is this is a metric. There aren't many metrics in a business where multiple teams can rally around. Usually these metrics are siloed with the team. So only one team cares about that metric, and it actually causes a lot of, obviously, internal friction that people really don't like. But PQLs, product qualified leads, is a silo breaking metric that many of your teams can rally around. So when we talk about product qualified leads as a metric, there's actually two things that we recommend looking at. Number one, the raw numbers, the raw monthly numbers. So you want to be able to say, last month we had 20 product qualified leads, this month we had 25, next month 30. So raw growth in number of product qualified leads over time. But you also want to measure PQL rate. So this is the percentage of your total signups in a period that got to PQL status. So think of, you got a 14-day trial. We had 100 signups this month, and 20 of them got to PQL status. So we're at a 20% PQL rate, and we want to see that number go up. So those are the two, I think, PQL metrics you need to be tracking. And what's great is everybody participates or has a stake in this game. Product certainly has a big stake at this game. So traditionally, product hasn't cared or even worried about or thought about or been involved with lead flow at all. But that changes in this world. Product is incredibly important, not only to build a great product that's going to drive word of mouth, but to build the smart onboarding that you need and the flows that you need to get people the value as early as possible in their initial usage. If product is building a lot of great features, but discovery of those features and usage of those features is really hard to get to for a free user or for an early user, then they're not going to be driving these product qualified leads that you need, and you're going to have to be dedicating more and more resources, human touch, to get those accounts where you need them in order to drive conversions. Marketing has shifted as well. This is kind of a nuance point, but it is marketing to drive trial signups and usage is different than marketing to just drive demo signups. So marketing has had to kind of shift the way they talk about message and direct traffic to actually drive signups for this model. So marketing has a huge play in actually driving people towards uh, that trial conversion and convincing them that they should actually try the product versus talk to a salesperson. But marketing is also, especially if we're talking growth marketing, is heavily involved with those onboarding sequences for those new signups, even in-app at times. And also, product marketing is becoming really important for generating product qualified leads. Just because someone signs up for a trial doesn't mean marketing's job is done at all, right? These people are still in evaluation phase and need to be educated and learn about the new features, not just the features and using them, but why they're valuable. So marketing has a huge play in driving product qualified leads, not just leads, but product qualified leads. CS is becoming more and more involved in that pre-conversion phase and helping people get to certain levels of product qualification. Not to mention they're the ones that are really in charge of all the support library and the assets that are needed to help people learn how to use the product in a self-serve way. So CS has got an eye on product qualified leads, and of course sales doesn't necessarily have a huge hand in driving product qualified leads per se, but they certainly have a stake in product qualified leads because those are the leads that are going to convert. The more product qualified leads are, the easier time sales has closing those deals, without a doubt. So sales certainly has a stake in this product qualified lead game. So generally, in conclusion on this point is I really love product qualified leads because it is one of those kind of magic unifying metrics that teams can rally around and really work on and participate in driving. Um, so that's great. Deep breath. I know that was a lot of information packed into a short amount of time, but I just want to kind of summarize it here for you. So in summary, the try before you buy model is here and it's here to stay. It's not going away. In fact, it's just going to get bigger and more common. But that model it requires that you qualify your leads based on product usage. If you try and qualify based on anything but product usage, you're really just missing the mark here. And I don't know what else you would use, to be honest. Product engagement and activation, those are the best ways to measure interest today. As we said, the way you qualify based on firmographic criteria is about the same as you would before. But the real difference is how do we determine whether or not someone is interested enough in our product to buy it and pay for it? And how they're engaging with the product and how far they are in that activation journey is really the best measure for that. So that means you need to track and use activation rate as that key metric for defining your product qualified leads. You need to define, those 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps that determines activation, and then you have to measure how far people are along that journey. And then you can define your PQL playbook around, you need to define the kind of complexity of your product, understand that, but then define it using the size of the incoming opportunities to determine at which point in activation do we have our team get involved and reach out and try and get people on the phone and meetings. And then this is a really important point, but you need to bring that PQL mentality, that framework to the post-sale expansion part of the funnel as well. You can't just, it's just as valuable there as it is in that pre-sale phase. And then finally, put this in place and rally your team around product qualified leads. Again, it is really nice. It's unusual and really nice to have a metric that everybody can kind of come together around and rally for. So this product qualified lead is definitely one of those metrics. So that brings us to the end of our journey here. Again, it was a lot. I hope you were able to take in most of it. But like I said, we have a ebook on our site that details this in more detail. Um, and we actually would be happy and love to talk to anybody about the specifics of their product qualified lead process or setting that up at any time. Thanks again for your time. Enjoy the summit.